Glad to have Cory Siskind here from Base Operations, CEO and founder of Base Operations. Cory, thanks for joining us today. This is exciting.
Thanks for having me.
We also have Mike Gruen, Cybrary's VP of Engineering and CISO.
Hi.
So let's kick off, Cory, with maybe just an introduction about yourself, a little bit of a background, and then what Base Operations does.
Sure. So my name is Cory Siskind. I'm the founder and CEO of Base Operations. So my background is mostly in international security, organized crime. I built my early career in that industry, lived in Mexico City for a long time, serving as a geopolitical risk analyst. And then I just sort of got this bug for technology and disrupting this industry, which is pretty old school. So I started Base Operations, and Base is a company that helps other companies keep their global workforce safe and connected with our approach to crisis and risk management. So we have a dashboard for security personnel within a company that helps them do things like monitor their assets abroad, do analysis with our proprietary data, coordinate crises. And then we have an app for employees that helps them get ready for a trip if they're traveling abroad, to get ground truth, to understand, if they're traveling, especially in an emerging market, what it looks like, how to get safely from point A to point B, geofence alerts, all these cool things that, we can go into further. But we're an early stage company disrupting the physical security market.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So would the core buyer for your product be like a CISO at an organization?
Yes.
Is that how that works?
Yeah. So it's typically a CISO, but it might also be the head of global corporate travel, corporate security, frequently head of intelligence as well, because there's a big sort of data piece to what we do with looking at sort of crime statistics over time and how that impacts business decisions. So yeah, that's sort of who we sell into.
That's very cool. So where did the idea come from? How did the company start?
Yeah. So I mentioned that in my early career, I worked in Mexico City for a company called Control Risk, which is sort of the market leader in helping facilitate entry of other companies into emerging markets, like how to deal with the complexities of operating in countries with high crime rates, high corruption rates. Wow. So I worked in that industry. I loved it. Really interesting work. And I'm really passionate about sort of bringing business to emerging markets. Gotcha. But there was this persistent problem, which was just that nobody knew what was going on from a data perspective. Like I would spend all day, every day, looking at YouTube videos of like what cartels were doing and drawing maps of, the Zetas are here and the Gulf Cartel is here and that sort of thing.
Wow.
But it was all very like, finger in the air, just this feels like what this is happening. And it wasn't scientific, it wasn't comprehensive. We weren't using web scraping or natural language processing or all these really cool technologies.
And the CIA doesn't just make that available?
I think even government is not as advanced as you'd want them to be. Okay. It's a really hard problem to solve, right? Like you have underreporting rates. People don't report crimes because they don't, mostly in emerging markets, but they don't have confidence that the local police force can do anything about it. There's violence against journalists. There's corruption, manipulation of statistics. So you have the situation where you have really high crime rates and nobody knows what's going on. So it's everybody, sort of chatting over WhatsApp and saying like, hey, this area is getting worse, or I'm seeing this over here, but it's totally decentralized. There's nowhere you can look that up. There's nowhere that makes that intuitive and searchable. So that's what we built.
So sort of corporate, and it could actually go into other sort of, sectors or whatever, but safety and security was a really unmet problem.
Yeah.
Right. That was probably getting worse and worse. Mm-hmm. And you realize that data and the world of, all around us, the technology world all around us has the ability to serve this very differently than it did before.
Yep, absolutely.
That's fantastic. So how did you get the company off the ground?
Yeah. So I worked in Mexico in security, as I mentioned, for a while. And I had this idea bubbling up, but I never saw myself as an entrepreneur. That was not sort of the path that I was expecting. So I spent some time in security, and then I moved to just regular management consulting, but still based in Mexico City and traveling all around Latin America for different projects. I had one experience where I was on a project in Guatemala City, and a bunch of my, a bunch of my colleagues took a a taxi to a restaurant, and we had no preparation for being in Guatemala City. We didn't know what the environment was like. And they were stopped by an armed gunman, and, laptops stolen, phones stolen, the whole thing. Everyone was okay, luckily, but everyone in that car ended up leaving the company within a year or two, just because of sort of the stress of that event.
Sure.
And,
right.
And so
Can't blame them.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So and being sent into a market like that was sort of no preparation. So I went from management consulting to, I did this graduate program at Harvard and MIT in public policy and business. And there just sort of snowballed. I had an idea that a professor said, he thought it was interesting. He thought I should pitch and recruit a team. So I did that. We won a business plan competition. All of a sudden, we were sort of picking up all this non-dilutive capital to build a prototype.
Oh, awesome.
When I was at MIT, partnered up with some great computer scientists, data scientists, and we were building something. Microsoft heard about it. They thought it was really interesting. So they gave us $50,000 worth of legal services and a team of amazing patent lawyers.
Incredible.
Wow.
We filed a patent. And then when I was still in school, we started speaking with investors. And then I figured, this is a real thing. So let's go for it.
That's really awesome.
Wow. So when was that? Can you tell us where in time was that? Like when you were getting the non-dilutive capital and so on?
So in, I think, summer 2017, we took a really shoddy prototype and spent the summer in Mexico driving around with like Uber drivers and having them use it and seeing if this was something that people really wanted, even though it was like the simplest version of what we wanted to build eventually. And they were just kind of taken aback. They're like, there's nothing like this. Right now we're using 8 different things to build this product. We're using Waze and Life 360 to see where everyone is. Yeah. We're using WhatsApp to talk to each other. But what we really want is like something that aggregates all of this information that we're sharing with each other and turns it into actionable advice. Like, how do you get from point A to point B? How do you, send me a geofence when I'm in geofence alert when I'm in the area where there's a crime happening, that sort of thing.
So that's incredible. So you had basically just a sliver of market validation from that type of work that you did. For Cybrary, for us, it was, okay, well, we have a crazy idea to give away a lot of free training. And we launched it in January of 2015. And then by like March, we had about 30,000 users already out of the gate. And that was that same window there where you see it and it's like, okay, I don't have any of this figured out at all.
Yeah.
Really don't know what we're getting ourselves into in any way. But there's something there. There's that little sliver of hope. And so I'll come back to that little sliver of hope for us as it relates to an investor that we both share, who was very important in our upbringing. But why don't you tell us, so it kind of went from a little bit of market validation to obviously, you had some traction, and it got you into a startup accelerator called Techstars, which for those of you that don't know, Techstars is probably arguably the most prestigious startup accelerator in the world. They have a variety of different locations. So why don't you tell us kind of how you went from that skosh of market validation to Techstars and then what happened next? Yeah.
And that really early validation, we weren't even focused on, do companies want to buy this? We were really just focused on, we feel deeply that this is a need in the market that's unsolved. Do people like it? Do everyday people? And, and someday if we want to expand this beyond just selling into companies to, mass market, something that people could buy, is this, meeting that need? So we took that initial validation and it was the response was explosive, like what we saw over the summer in Mexico with how much people liked it. And so just, again, kept snowballing that, more competitions, more feedback and support. And then when I graduated from this graduate program in 2018, I think even before graduation, we'd started Techstars. And so we went, the 5 of us, down to Austin, Texas. We did Techstars in Austin and spent 3 very hot months in Austin baking under the Texan sun. But just going full force into building an enterprise platform. So we'd sort of validated the essential concept. And now we wanted to see, how do we make this something that companies' security departments can use every day with their thousands of people based all around the world to help them prevent crises, and then if a crisis does happen, to manage it.
Gotcha. Okay, very neat. So Some of the things that we've done here that have really caused inflection points for us is really good, strong product discovery, right? When you really get down, you find out who your ideal customer profile is, and you figure out who you're going to be selling to, and you figure out how this thing can uniquely deliver them value. Where did you guys do that sort of product discovery work? What did that look like? Were there any aha moments? And then who ended up, or how did you end up coming to your ideal customer profile?
Yeah. Some of our early adopters helped us learn a lot about, if you look at the crossing the chasm perspective, like who's in it first, that's who, we've been working with so far. And that's a big Fortune 50 insurance company. That's a global 100 energy company that we've become very close to. And we were able to run pilots with them last year, 2018 and sort of 2019 and into 2020, and just learned so much about what parts of our technology are actually the most meaningful for them. And it's, not always the things that you think, right? Like
sure.
people,
Absolutely.
Something that you thought was just sort of a basic, of course, this is going to be included for them as the essence, or something that you think is so cool, they actually don't need. So we got a lot of that kind of feedback. And then similarly, we went really deep with our early pilot customers into what does success mean for you, right? So we had all these metrics. We had 6 different buckets of things we wanted to measure. And then within those, like 4 different, we're going to look at all of these metrics. And we went through and just through, the 2 major pilots we've had with Fortune 500s just hit like 95 to 100% of the metrics that, they had defined with us. And so that was sort of an aha moment of like, okay, this was their definition of success, and we blew it out of the water.
Did that work happen at Techstars? And then also in an extension of that question, like what did Techstars actually do for you guys?
Techstars really drove a metrics-driven approach into how we do things. So they were really instrumental in encouraging us to have certain metrics that we look at week over week, and we hold ourselves accountable to, whether it's sales and growth of the funnel through different stages, or whether it's certain elements of product development, which can be harder to quantify, but looking at things like, customer satisfaction scores and crash rates and all these different things. So we are now just a much more quantitative company because of our time in Techstars. And then also Techstars was amazing for just, if you're a bunch of students and you're a relatively young company or early stage company, they provide kind of a management layer of all these advisors who, are people that I still talk to the managing director of my program, Zoe, every week. Talked to her yesterday. Oh, wow. And they provide like sort of that extra accountability. And if you're, in my case, building a company for the first time, someone you can ask just sort of basic questions that someone else might know really well, but how should I structure this commission element of this, contract, or like really specific things that you can just bounce ideas off of. And so you're not so alone in the process. Yeah.
Guidance is huge. The network is huge as well. That's really, really important stuff. So I just mentioned this, but we share a similar investor in a gentleman named Justin Label, who I think I mentioned this to you recently, was the first believer in us, the first person to actually see that there was something here, and led our first, he led our first round, which was an angel round in 2015, late 2015. So how did Justin come into the picture? And why don't you tell us the good news about a recent funding round of your own?
Yeah. Justin is so great, and he's a huge fan of what you're doing. He said that when I had lunch with him the other day, and he said the most exciting thing he's doing right now is watching Cybrary grow.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So huge fan of you guys. Justin came in later into our round. So we raised a pre-seed round, which was led by Glasswing Ventures in Boston. Also Spiro Ventures in San Francisco participated, Good Growth Capital in Charleston, Magma Partners, which is in Chile. So they are sort of our Latin American presence, and they're super helpful in that way. And then lots of other amazing angels, like people that come from industry that, just really believed in what we were doing and wanted it to move forward. So that was, we were really excited about who joined the round. I think Justin found us actually through an article in DC Inno, and reached out to me. He saw that Glasswing had invested, and they're close. So that's how it happened. And he's a really decisive guy. I think we met twice, and he said, I'm in.
If Justin goes and makes an investment, and if you're ever in a position where you want to invest in companies, just follow Justin because he's kind of the startup whisperer.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So the team today is split between two cities, Boston and then DC.
Yep.
What brought you to DC? Because you got your roots in Boston. So what brought you here?
Yeah, I have roots in most cities that are more like entrepreneurial focused than DC, actually. So I'm from San Francisco.
Oh, sure.
And did most, my graduate education in Boston, which is also a great startup city. But DC I really am bullish on DC for secure tech and, building cyber and physical security companies here. And then also for us, we sell into companies' global security operations centers. And so if some of the biggest tech companies in San Francisco, if I want to go talk to their GSOC, their Global Security Operations Center, I'd have to go to Arlington. So our customers are here.
Yeah.
So it just makes sense. And I think what we're doing has a lot of implications, not just for companies' security departments, but eventually for the intelligence community, for diplomats, international organizations, that sort of thing.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
How did you guys end up here? Can I ask a question back?
Oh, I'm from here.
Oh, yeah.
So it's very boring.
Fair.
No, I grew up here. I went to undergrad in North Carolina, and then moved back. And but yeah, this area, the DC region, being just so cyber, focused. It helped me. I eventually my career just went that direction.
Yeah.
And it developed a really strong network of local, great cyber talent. And that came in very useful when we wanted to get this thing off the ground. We sought out to get, something in the range of 15 or so core cybersecurity courses out by launch. So we just went to our network and brought those people in. They were extremely instrumental in getting us here. People like Georgia Weidman, Kelly Handerhan, some folks like that. So That's why we're here. I want to hear about the technology a little bit. So I know that's generally Mike's department over mine.
Sure. So you mentioned that you pull data from lots of different places. I'm curious, sort of about the data sources and how you pull it all together.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about the problem statement, which is just that in emerging markets where you have the highest crime rates, you also have the least amount of data about what's going on. So that's sort of the real problem that we were focused on. And in my time working as a security analyst, I would informally gather information from lots of different sources. So I'd look at sort of government websites, I'd look at Twitter and blogs, but I just, I figured there's a much more technologically advanced way to do this. So now our platform more automatically gathers information from various sources. So we pull from government statistical institutes, which, I'll go through all of them. Government, local news, social media, and then data from partnerships. And for government statistics, governments frequently have a wealth of information, but it's really hard to get to, especially in these emerging markets where it's behind a really antiquated web interface. So we do a lot of work with accessing data that's hard to get to. And then, mining social media, mining local news sites, and then getting all sorts of interesting data sets from partners. We're working on a partnership with a journalistic organization that has people based all over the world, and a bunch of companies have their own data sets. So if they'll share them with us, we can have a partnership together. So aggregating all of this information and then visualizing it in ways that are really intuitive and easy to use. So we have a heat map interface that you can sort of zoom out and go, get a full city perspective. If you're in Mexico City, Sao Paulo, a city like that, you can see the whole city and see sort of where the hot spots are and how, where the airport is in comparison to your hotel and what that might mean for you. And then you can zoom way in on your block and see what are frequent events that happen in your area. Things that, if you're in a pretty safe area, but there's a lot of muggings in the evening, that's something you might want to be aware of. And we're really into pattern analysis. So looking at seasonality, time of day. Mexico City, for example, in the second week of December has a major spike in crime because everyone's just received their Christmas bonus and there's more cash moving around the city. So,
oh, wow.
I'm glad Jonathan's there now. My infrastructure.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Tell him that. No, I'm just kidding. He's in the clear. He's in January. But just being able to, not only have a general idea of where in the city things are happening, and even that can be very dynamic when you're dealing with a heavy organized crime presence and you have cartels that are fighting for control of different neighborhoods. So like that shifts in a really dynamic way.
Wow.
But then also looking at crime spikes in the summer, or downtown Sao Paulo is fine during the day, but at night it gets really dangerous. So having a sense of just in time information, super relevant, and then giving you the so what on top of that information. So routing you safely from the airport to your hotel or the client site or your house or wherever. Geofenced alerts, like basically not just freaking you out and overloading you with a bunch of information, but helping you make decisions that keep you safer.
So I'm curious about the social media part. Mm-hmm. So a couple companies ago, I worked on a natural language processing. It was a government product for them to use to identify areas, mostly in the Middle East. So there were like language issues that we ran into, and I'm curious like how you guys are sort of solving that, how you pick what markets you're in, like what cities you're sort of, I can only imagine you don't do every single city.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's a fair assumption. We'd like to. So the vision is certainly global.
Right.
We have like an algorithm that helps us decide what cities to go into, and we look at 4 different categories of information to decide where to go. We look at homicide rate per 100,000 as like a proxy for general crime. We look at city GDP. So like, is this a big enough city that international business is based there? We look at their ranking on Transparency International's index. So is it like a low information environment? And then we make some exceptions for like where our customers are. Okay. But because of that, we've started mostly in Latin America. Like Latin America is what fits a lot of that profile. And so to your language question, we've been lucky so far with mostly Spanish and Portuguese.
Right.
But obviously working in different languages is a challenge, and learning, getting better at crafting algorithms that can learn slang. So there's 5 different ways to say kidnapping in Mexico alone. Picking up on all of that and getting smarter with how we mine information. So yeah, it's a challenge.
Yeah, I actually happened to be in a briefing where we were demonstrating our ability to ingest Twitter data right as the Arab Spring was starting. And a couple people had to leave the room because stuff was actually happening. It was pretty amazing. We couldn't have picked a better time to do a demo, but
yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then, so do users have the ability to also push information to you about what they're seeing, and how does that sort of work?
Definitely. So they can report into us, and that's a great source of information, especially real-time information. Initially, right now we're really focused on our enterprise suite of products. So most of our customers are employees of companies or security professionals within a company. But in the long-term roadmap, we'd also like to launch a version for locals that's really focused on them reporting in. And we've piloted that in Mexico before and had great response. So that's just one more way that we can add more real-time data from locals.
That's pretty cool. And then you also mentioned for my perspective, I mentioned that I have a guy on my team. He's essentially a digital nomad, cloud native, whatever you want to call them, who's traveling all the time, keeping track of sort of what's going on in the cities where he's going, is giving me insight. Is that something that your product's able to do?
Sure, absolutely. So typically the user from the company perspective is twofold. It's the security department, so typically in the GSOC, the Global Security Operations Center, and they'll have that up on a big screen, and they can dive in and do analysis to not just see where their assets are globally, and if they're in close proximity to crime, and manage crises like the protests in Hong Kong, getting people to safety, et cetera. But they can also use our proprietary data to think about where should we build an office? Where should we house teams?
Oh, that's really interesting.
Eventually, we'd love to work more with logistics companies. Like, how do we route safely from, freight, for example, which has huge levels of theft. Yeah. So that's kind of what the security department is seeing. And then your employees are, they have an app that has these dynamic maps. They can switch between cities. And then it's all built around the so what, like I mentioned. Right. It's all built around how do you make this actionable and relevant for people's lives. So if he was your asset, you could go, into the security department and say, where is he? How's he doing? Let's say a massive earthquake happened in Mexico City, which has happened many times while I was there. And it's like total chaos for companies. We worked with one company that has 1,500 people in an office in Mexico City. It took them 8 days to get in touch with everyone, to, get a count of where people were, if they needed resources. And then also, you want to make sure your people are safe. And then you also want to make sure that you're getting back to business as soon as possible, because all the productivity lost in an event like that. So we help companies, once something does happen, get a count of people quickly, and then get back to business continuity.
Interesting. And then I imagine you tie into other, there's like insurance companies that offer travel insurance internationally and stuff like that. Do you partner with them? How do you sort of work with those companies that also offer similar services of there's something happening in this area, let's help pull your people out?
Yeah, I think, integrations are so key in security, especially if, we want to be a part of the entire value chain. And so partnerships are something that, it's in the works.
Okay.
It's early days. It's early days.
It's
right.
early days.
I don't think we actually covered how large the company is right now.
So we're small. We're early stage. We are 5 people. But because we just raised this round, we'll be making some key hires and building out the DC office, which I'm excited about because it's been a little lonely down here.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
What are those next hires? I'm curious.
So we'll be bringing in more people on the sales front to augment, our activities there.
It's time to work the go-to-market for sure.
Yep. We landed on a feature set that we're really excited about. There's so much more we can do with the technology.
Sure.
But right now, for where we are, companies are getting a lot of value out of what we built already. So it's time to just get it into the hands of more customers.
That makes sense. Yep. That makes sense.
How do you deal with that challenge of sort of saying no, right? That's I think the key to any early stage company is being focused and knowing that we can do all of these things, but we're not going to do those things.
Yeah.
That's just an ongoing challenge, right? For everyone.
Right.
I think we ask ourselves all the time, is there a critical mass on this feedback? And we actually have a really great experts committee that has security personnel from a lot of top Fortune 500 companies. And we're not selling to them. We just go to them and we say, if we built this thing, would you use it? And we do just a lot of surveys with them. And that way we sort of suss out, is this something that only this company wants and we're going to spend a ton of time building it and it's really only for them? Or is this something that, 75% of our companies are pretty interested in? So that's mostly how we do it.
That's interesting.
With us, in terms of that distraction, I think that's a really important thing for companies to stay focused on. For us, it was end user security awareness. So in 2015, we had all these users coming in, and some of them would reach and fill out some contact forms, and so we started seeing hey, we need this for 5,000 people for end user security awareness, and so at first you look at it and you're like, no, that's not what we do. So, but then you start to see it over and over again,
right? And
we started to see it over and over and over and over, and it really pulls you pretty hard. So fortunately, we didn't spend too much time on that. We now we still get those inquiries all the time. All the time, but it's always just a quick, oh, nope, sorry, it's not what we do.
Right.
And you have to move on. It's tough though.
Yeah, it's very hard because when you're, I don't come from sales. I come from technically more of the product side because I was always an analyst creating these security products for companies. And so I'm getting up to speed on sales and reading every book and, practicing everything. And, I always want to say yes, right? That's the temptation. But I think being focused is the most important thing. Similarly, being able to suss out when customers are a right now customer or they're they're just sort of, exploring and being able to differentiate that and be really be strict with who you think is a serious prospect and who's someone for maybe next year.
Right. There's plenty of people that'll say, yeah, no, if you built that, I'd buy that. But the fact is you could build it and they still won't buy it.
Yeah.
They're
so then you're would you pay us to buy it, to build it right now?
Write me a check and we'll see.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Anything more on the tech, Mike?
No, I think that maybe one question would be, what was some of the biggest challenge? What was a big challenge that you guys faced with from a technology perspective?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that's hard about what we do is we are showing people really intense, scary information.
Sure.
And so we think a lot about design and how can we communicate through design that this is a decision-making tool. It's not meant to freak you out with too much information. So we've done a lot of simple changes, something even as small as changing the color scale of our heat map. So a typical, a traditional heat map has a red to green or a red to blue scale. And we found that when people saw red neighborhoods, it was just too overwhelming and they were moving beyond the factual and it was just causing stress. And we don't want to be a product that stresses people out. We want to be, like I mentioned before, sort of like the Q from James Bond, like we're the technology source powering you through your day to day. And so we ended up changing our color scale. And we have so much information. How do we decide how much information to give our end users who are, not necessarily security people? How much do we give to security people so that they can make decisions but not be overwhelmed by thousands of crimes that are happening in these cities and a million different ways to filter it and see different perspectives. So actually just the UI element of what we do and optimizing that is something we think about all the time.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. It really hadn't occurred to me the scare factor, but that makes a ton of sense now that you say it. So you also mentioned the alerting. If I have somebody abroad and I'm back at the GSOC, do I get also alerts when they're in areas and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's customizable to the company. So some companies want to know everything or they want to group it. Like they want to know everything that their C-suite is doing because, they have different priorities. Or some are way more hands-off and they don't want to know. So you can receive alerts. That's customizable for the company, basically.
And I imagine there's a lot of balancing between what alerts do you send to the individual that's there versus allowing maybe somebody back a little further away from the action to help make some decisions that are maybe a little broader for the whole group that's there. Or something.
Yeah, totally. And you have different profiles. Like you have security geeks like me and my team that would want to know everything that's happening. And then you have people that really only want to know if it's something massive that's going to impact them. And so we're working on like a risk tolerance scale so that you could just really easily say, just tell me the major stuff or, I'm going to this new place and I don't know where I am and I want to know a lot. So we're working on sort of how do we accommodate those different preferences.
I could also see that changing over time where once you get to an area, maybe you're new to the area, we're going to be a little bit more hands-on. And then as you've been there for a longer period of time, maybe just scaling it back.
Absolutely. Because what we've really built is a product for the entire global workforce. It's not just for a business traveler who's going somewhere for a week. It's also for people that live in these markets. So different tolerance there.
Yep.
Super cool.
Yeah.
So it's off to go to market next. You're still in the stage where you're doing a lot of, I guess, your majority of your time is product work, right? So the discovery, talking to the customers, potential customers, and figuring that stuff out. I can tell you with 100% certainty that the road ahead is not an easy one. But it sounds like you have some amazing technology. You've definitely got the chops to do this. I'm sure the grit is down there, somewhere, inside there too, which is critical. Best of luck as you go and build the company, But Cory Siskind, the CEO and founder of Base Operations, this was fantastic.
Thank you so much for having
Great
me. This was great.
Thank you for coming on.
All right, thanks.